The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
New information being revealed as the search enters day 4 for Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, why police are being asked if she knew her abductor. And in Georgia, a murder trial begins in the case of a college student brutally killed and then her apartment set ablaze back in 2001. We are focusing on the evidence from both sides. And in Wisconsin, a kayaker who faked his own fatal drowning has disappeared again. In the court of law, it's all about the law and the facts, but let's call to order Court of Opinion. Welcome to Court of Opinion. I'm Jenaé. Thanks so much for joining us as we continue to follow this heartbreaking case out of Arizona that has garnered the nation's attention. The search for Today Show host Savannah Guthrie's missing mom, Nancy. Police believe the 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was abducted from her home in the middle of the night. And according to law enforcement, she was last seen in her home in Tucson Saturday night after family saw her around 9:45 p.m. There's deeply troubling details that continue to emerge. Reporter Fort Hatchett with Scripps News Group has the latest in the investigation and the tips the authorities are receiving in this case.
Both online and here on the ground in Tucson, there have been lots of rumors swirling about different family members potentially being people of interest or even prime suspects in this case. But the Pima County Sheriff saying that they have no suspects identified and there are no people of interest quite yet. There has been DNA and other forensic testing on items found at this home, but they haven't turned up anything quite yet. More than 100 detectives from the Pima County Sheriff's Department are working on the case right now, and we've seen the search and rescue team in a helicopter overhead at different points this week, but still no suspect or person of interest has been identified, and this home has now been turned back over to the Guthrie family, the sheriff saying that they are finished processing it. Here on the ground in Tucson, there are tip lines for the FBI, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and the anonymous 88 crime program through the county attorney's office. That program alone has received hundreds of tips from all across the country. Some are outlandish enough to disregard right away, but the majority have to be sorted through one by one.
Look, I get it. People want answers. They have a lot of questions. But it's important to respect the investigation and to protect the integrity of that investigation. You can't disclose details that are later going to hurt that investigation.
And one of the tips they are still looking to authenticate is that ransom note that came into KGUN, the Scripps News station here in Tucson. So far, at least, the Sheriff's Department saying that they have not been able to authenticate that note. And just to highlight the kind of national interest that this case has garnered, the Pima County Attorney's Office says that in addition to the hundreds of calls of tips they've received into their tip line, they've also received calls from around the country with people offering money to try to up the reward for any information that would lead to an arrest. Fort Hatchett, Scripps News Group, Tucson.
Significant attention in this case as that search continues. Let's bring in our panel to see what they think about where we are in this case so far. We have with us trial attorney and jury consultant Madeline Somerville, criminal defense attorney and former head New Jersey County Prosecutor Bob Bianchi, and trial attorney Philip Dubé. Great to see you all here on Court of Opinion. Madeline, I want to start with you. I mean, these details seem to morph as the days go on. Talk to me about what's standing out to you at where we are in this search for Nancy Guthrie.
This is breaking my heart. You know, I found out today that actually she had gone to church the night before she disappeared and was supposed to be at church the next morning, and it was so rare for her not to be there that her friends at church immediately knew that there was something wrong and called her family.
Yeah, she had a village.
She had a village, and so it's just a lovely person and a lovely family, so it's so heartbreaking. But the details. So we do know that she had 2 cameras in her home and both of them were smashed, at least 2. So the person who came into her home knew that and did something about it. And whether that's somebody, I know that right now there's a person of interest who might be the son-in-law that is of a consideration specifically because perhaps he would have already been invited into the house and seen where that was. I know that there was a concern about the blood splatter and that it was supposed to have been a slow drip rather than a spatter. It's just devastating, and it hurts to go over all of these details knowing that they haven't found her and what's going on yet. So
and want to address some of those things that you mentioned, because there are a lot of details that are coming out that police haven't confirmed about the cameras. They say they are looking into it. That's their official word on it. You can see plainly that a camera is missing from the outside of that home for sure.
Yes.
And then you referenced the son-in-law. And Bob Bianchi, I actually want to ask you about this one, because that's something that has been reported by News Nation's Ashley Banfield from unnamed sources. You heard our reporter saying earlier that there's these rumors about family, but there's been an official statement from the Pima County Sheriff's Office on that. Actually, let me put that up before I bring you in, Bob, and that is, they say at this point, investigators have not identified a suspect or a person of interest in this case. Detectives continue to speak with anyone who might have had contact with Mrs. Guthrie. Detectives are working closely with the Guthrie family. While we appreciate the public's concern, sharing unverified accusations or false information is irresponsible and does not assist in the investigation, and they double down. No suspect or person of interest has been identified at this time. Bob Bianchi, however, I will ask you about the details that we have so far that have been confirmed based on your experience, having seen so many homicide and potentially abduction and kidnapping situations. Do the details fit someone who knew her, a family member, or a crazed fan, or someone connected to her daughter's celebrity?
I think I'm going to give an unsatisfying response from the perspective of a person who used to give these press conferences, where I used to have to get up there, excuse the expression, because I'm in the media now, but we used to have to feed the beast by talking but not saying anything, because many times people were jumping to massive conclusions, taking pieces of quote-unquote evidence, rumors, operating off the rumors, and coming to completely wildly speculatively wrong conclusions. So I am missed to really predict. I will say, from the standpoint of a person, again, who's given these conferences, that while it is we would want to talk but not really say anything, unfortunately, them not releasing details is an imperatively important investigative tool. What's confounding to me, though, is that they're saying that there is no person of interest, there is no suspect, and they don't know what's going on. That's giving the bad guy or gal information. That you want to try to force them that they're being hunted down, that they're close to capture. You want them in a state of paranoia. You want them worked up, nervous, scared. You want to push that unforced error. So while not saying anything is a good thing, saying that there is no suspect or person of interest is not a good thing. And I won't even get into releasing the crime scene. Maybe you'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Philip Dubé, though, I got to get your opinion on what I just asked Bob, because you've seen all of these kind of criminal cases from being a county deputy public defender. Where do you think the details point to in terms of if this is someone who knew her or someone who targeted her who was not familiar to anyone in her life?
Well, this was definitely some type of a forcible abduction by virtue of the blood trail. And I'm not going to lie to you and call me madcap, but when I initially heard this story, I actually thought that she might have fallen prey to a wild animal. That, who knows, maybe a wild boar or a mountain lion or a bear made its way into the property. Maybe she left the door unlocked. I'm anxious to hear if they find whether or not they found animal blood at the scene, because you'd be amazed how intelligent and how crafty animals can be, particularly in the Catalina foothills out there in the boondocks outside of Tucson. They are hungry right now this time of year. So I would not be a bit surprised if there was some type of wild animal activity. Now, my opinion sort of changed when I heard about the ransom notes that were sent in. Then I thought, well, we still don't know if they've ruled out an animal. It could be just a prankster wanting some, some clicks and likes and just this sort of random clout chaser in social media.
Okay, I see your co-panelist, Philip Dubé. They want to jump in. I've got to address one thing first with the ransom note that you mentioned. That is something we reported on yesterday as well. A local station there in Tucson received it and turned it over to the authorities. Here was the response that the Pima County Sheriff's Office had, particularly about whether or not there was any ransom in this case.
Follow up on an answer that you gave earlier. You were asked if there were any. You were asked if there was any ransom, and you didn't say no. You said we're following all leads. Does that mean a ransom has come in?
We're following all leads we have. That's all I can tell you.
So again, that ransom note, unverified at this point. We don't know if it's someone trying to insert themselves into a viral story. We've seen that happen. But Madeline, I saw you trying to react to Philip Dubé. Go ahead.
Well, I think that when it comes to the animal theory, I know that that's been postulated in many cases, like the staircase, the documentary that existed. I know that was a theory that had been postulated there. And for somebody like me who grew up in the suburbs, you wouldn't even think that would be possible. But I do know that that's something that people consider. When it comes to the ransom note, though, I know that it was the same ransom note that was given to two different entities. One was to the local station and one was somewhere else. And typically, if it's pranksters, they're different ransom notes. And this one was exactly the same. I'm not saying that it's impossible.
And we also don't know if I think the other entity is TMZ. We don't know if they received it from whoever this was or if it was passed to them after it was given to the local station. But go ahead.
No, yeah. I mean, I think that when it comes to them kind of sending a calling card or tracing their tracks, everyone has their own thing, right? Every crazy person's going to have their own pattern. And so anything that they can do to follow a pattern or to try to trace that is going to be helpful.
Bob Bianchi, let's talk about the crime scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, we have to recognize the ransom note is probably legitimate. We have the FBI commenting on the ransom note, which, again, interjurisdictional, problems here. Everybody wants to get in front of that camera. But let's assume that note is there. It is, in my opinion, legitimate. It is an abduction. Time is of the essence. We got a crime scene. We got a woman we got to save. We got information management, hundreds of tips coming in. We may have a potential suspect. If law enforcement is smart, they're breaking people up into teams because you don't want to get pigeonholed and you don't want to sit there and be myopic or have confirmation bias. But that's what gets me about this crime scene. And to me, when I see something like this, I ask myself the following question. Is this amateur hour? I have never, ever been at a crime scene of any level of magnitude, an abduction and a homicide, potentially, and as importantly, where that scene has been released for months so that it can be processed over and over again. But more importantly, during the course of your investigation, information may come out. Let's say they get the person of interest or the suspect is confessing and they say something about the manner in which something occurred inside the house. You need to get back in there in order to forensically evaluate something you missed. I've done this for over 30 years. I can't tell you how many times we went in there and processed the scene and we realized, oopsie, we made a mistake and didn't take something we should have taken. So when I see that, there's a bigger picture here. I'm wondering, how thorough are these guys? How used to these kind of investigations are they when they release a crime scene? I think I heard within 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, this is too...
disagree, though. I respectfully
Philip,
disagree.
really quick, 30 seconds. We got to get to our break. Go ahead.
No, I think the FBI was beckoned to the scene because they have criminal profilers who have been trained in Quantico, Virginia, to come in and sort of visually take in everything that they can glean from a crime scene to figure out who a suspect could be. And I'd be interested to know whether or not they ruled out any type of vicious animal attack. But they didn't sort of intentionally insert themselves. They were called in. Not to mention, I think that area of the foothills is on federal land, so there may be quasi-federal jurisdiction.
Philip, that's where we have to leave it. We will, of course, continue to follow those developments. We've been showing you the tip line. If anyone has information, contact the Pima County Sheriff's Office. They are planning to hold their next press conference tomorrow, Thursday, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. When we come back from this break, we are going to turn our attention to Georgia, a case that went cold for 23 years. Now a man stands trial for the brutal killing of a law student, and we look at the best evidence jurors have seen so far in this long-awaited murder trial.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Welcome back. A Georgia cold case, more than 2 decades old, is now in front of a jury. Back in 2001, prosecutors say Tara Louise Baker, a first-year University of Georgia law student, was sexually assaulted, stabbed, strangled, and then left for dead inside of her apartment, which was then set on fire. This was a case that had disturbing details gripping that neighborhood. That case went unsolved for 23 years until advances in forensic science led investigators to a DNA match linking Edric Faust to the crime, who now faces life in prison if convicted. But the defense says that DNA alone isn't enough, arguing there's no proof that actually places Faust inside of Baker's apartment. And they've also pointed jurors back to Baker's boyfriend at the time, Chris Melton, who was once a prime suspect in this crime. Let's take a listen to both sides giving their opening statements this week.
For decades, everyone who loved Tara wanted to know who killed Tara Baker. Ladies and gentlemen, Edric Faust killed Tara Baker. Edric Faust sexually assaulted Tara Baker. Edric Faust set her house on fire.
You'll learn the lead investigator in this case, Elizabeth Bigham, told Chris Melton it was okay if he changed his story or changed his timeline of when he was with Miss Baker. And if he admitted to lying to police for 23 years so that she could explain away his DNA and put the focus on Mr. Faust and the responsibility for Miss Baker's murder on Mr. Faust, everything would be okay. She would explain it away. The allure of being a hero, the allure of being on TV, being the officer to solve the 23-year-old Tara Baker case became too strong. The allure of being on TV became more powerful than following the evidence.
We are in the first week of this trial, again, 23 years after the crime. So let's get into the most compelling evidence that jurors have seen so far, beginning with the crime scene photos showing damage to the front door of Tara Baker's home, signaling to the possibility of a forced entry. Now, also during the prosecutors' openings, they said it had never been confirmed exactly how the killer entered her home. The defense brought up this other image of a bent window frame during their openings at Tara's home. Since this was shown during openings, of course, it has not been admitted as evidence yet. But both of these pointing to what the scene looked like, and these jurors are taking that in. Let's bring in our guest panel. We have with us Madeline Somerville, Bob Bianchi, and Philip Dubé. Bob, let me start with you on this one. This is a cold case turned into a hot trial that is happening now in front of this jury in the same jurisdiction where perhaps some of them remember when this happened.
Yeah, so, you know, so many cases that were cold cases. I remember it goes back to when I first started doing homicide work. We didn't have DNA, computers, or phones. I wonder, how did we ever solve a crime? But we did, and we got convictions. And now that old school stuff wasn't able to work in this particular case, but decades later, with the refinement of DNA evidence, we now have a new batch of cases that are solving otherwise cold cases, as we call them. The thing with this case that struck me is that the DNA, at least as I understand it, is coming from the genital area of the victim. And the first thing that struck me is, well, that can be explained by a lot of things, including consensual sex. So I am interested in listening to whether or not they're going to be able to have any medical doctors that are going to talk about forcible injuries to this woman in that particular area, as opposed to casual sex, which could be in a wide range of a time period when somebody may have semen inside of them, not necessarily at the time of the crime. That's the first thing that struck me. Second thing, I'll leave the rest of the guess, is that there was also hairs found in her hand. Now, that's typically something we want to look at. We actually bag the hands in a homicide case because we know that there's fingernail scrapings. Usually when people are scratching, we have hair in their hands. It's what we call trace evidence. The trace evidence, as I understand it, the hair, which is really important to me, came back to a white person, to not an African American. That is very. I'm going to be interested to see how they're getting around that.
Philip Dubé, your opinion of this case and that evidence that we just showed of that potential forced entry inside of the home.
I think the reason why it went cold is because they did not have a forensic match to the sample that was recovered by the SART nurse, the sexual assault response team nurse. So what that means is they entered the specimen into CODIS, the combined DNA index system, and there was no hit. So what happens? Well, the case goes cold. They don't know who that DNA belongs to. But unbeknownst to everybody, this man got arrested several weeks after this homicide, and the DNA was entered into CODIS. The problem was nobody did a check. Nobody ran the DNA from the rape kit. Instead, it sat cold until the Coleman-Baker Act was passed in Georgia, signed by Governor Brian Kemp into law. And it forced law enforcement to reopen these cold cases, run the specimens then through the database, and lo and behold, they got a hit. So what I think probably happened is they sat him down in an interrogation room, said he has no idea who she is, and they never made whoopee. Well, if that's the case, how does he explain how his DNA got on the young girl? And I have a feeling that a statement is going to be coming into evidence at trial.
Madeline, jump in
lots
here.
of people
We've got that evidence, but we've also got a situation where because of a law in Georgia named for our victim here, that's why they were re-examining these cases.
Yeah, so one issue that's inherently going to crop up when you have cold cases and you're going back and looking at them is chain of custody of the evidence, and it's going to happen in all of these cases. And I thought I might share a story about when I was interning for a judge when she was working in Superior Criminal Court 1, and then she got moved up to the federal court. She was presiding over a rape trial, and it was the first one I had ever sat in on. And the lawyer was insanely good, and he argued chain of custody, and he was acquitted. Come to find out after the trial, this particular defendant had already been convicted twice of rape and was about to be on trial for another one. And it just goes to show it's so interesting that in our jury system, you're not allowed to talk about past crimes, or in this case, it's interesting because he was arrested shortly thereafter. I don't know for what in this particular instance, but I think you examine each case individually. And if you're trying to argue chain of custody, it can be incredibly successful. You could be a guilty person, but they didn't treat the evidence correctly, and you can walk.
Oh, you can imagine if this defense has that information, they will be using it. Let's move to another piece of evidence that was shown today that had the defense upset. This is a sketch from 2001. It was drawn by a sketch artist for police based off a woman's description. So she was a neighbor of the victim, and she said she saw a man, quote, acting suspiciously in the area around Baker's apartment when they believe she was murdered. And this witness was Karen Williams. She took the stand today, and during cross-examination, she said she didn't see the man try to avoid being seen or running. So she testified today, but then there was a mistrial request from the defense over her testimony because something she said today on the stand conflicted with what she told police back in 2001. Bob Bianchi, really quick, if you'll react to sketch artists and the weight of that in a court of law. We also have a look at what the defendant looked like back in 2001 compared to that sketch.
All right, so all I'm going to say is that the thing that struck me when I saw that was that this is such an antiquated tool that this may actually throw the jury off of the prosecution. I know that they think it may be a good thing. I just don't see the value of this evidence. I'm not sure. The fact that he's even in the area doesn't mean that, and the fact that he had sex with her doesn't mean he's the person who murdered her and set the fire. So I really don't know how the jury's going to see it. Obviously, the defense was upset, made a motion, it was denied. The jury will make its determination.
Sketch artists, Philip DeBay, are they strong? Eyewitness testimony we have here, that's pretty difficult as well.
No, I think it's weak. And if you remember in the Richard Allen prosecution, where the two young girls were killed in Indiana, the Judge Gull, excluded sketch artist evidence because she felt it was too prejudicial. They are not reliable forms of identification. If anything, they help law enforcement find leads and suspects. But to say that that should be used substantively in a criminal trial, I think it tends to mislead juries, and it would be an unfair use of identification evidence, just like the judge did in the Allen case.
And jury consultant Madeline Somerville, how do jurors respond to seeing an artist who took down someone's description as they described it? You know, it's not technology. This is actually someone going based on what someone is telling them.
Well, what's interesting actually about sketches in particular is that juries are very familiar with that as a technology that's used for identification in these types of cases because we see it on TV all the time. We've seen it for years, even if it's something that we don't use that's very accurate now. And so actually, I think that they would be I think we shouldn't overestimate the amount of prejudice that would come from them looking at this, because I think they understand we've gotten past it. I think they understand that this is an antiquated thing that we can't trust, that really could be anybody. And I mean, look, you know, you look at the screen, it doesn't match. I don't think that I don't think it would unfairly prejudice the jury, but I would certainly argue that because I don't think it's very effective.
All right, we're going to leave it there, but we will continue to follow this case. They have many weeks ahead there in the case over the murder of Tara Barker. When we come back, we're going beyond the gavel. The mother of a teenager who admitted to going on a shooting spree. She speaks during day 2 of his sentencing hearing, and now she says the teen's deadly actions have affected her and gives us a hint at what his defense may be. Up next.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
Welcome back. We are taking you now beyond the gavel, a case that didn't have a trial at all, a mass shooting that gripped a Raleigh neighborhood with terror, a shooting that seemed indiscriminate, not limited to a place or targeted persons, and now a judge from that same city must decide what the punishment should be for the teen who pleaded guilty to all of that carnage. 18-year-old Austin Thompson was back in court for day 2 of a sentencing hearing, which could end with him spending the rest of his life behind bars. Now, because of his age at the time of this attack that killed 5 people, Thompson can't receive the death penalty. And today we saw the sights and sounds of that rampage. Take a look.
Those lights are on.
That was body camera footage from an officer who was there in a standoff with the defendant during the time that they were trying to take him down, and was also a shooting survivor themselves. Now, the defendant's mother, Elise, she took the stand today to testify about finding her son James's body inside of her home, the first victim of her other son, Austin. And she detailed what it's been like for her to lose essentially both of her children.
We lost both of our children in one afternoon. I wrote a thing.
That's fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I read it now, or do you?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Okay. No one ever thinks they will outlive their child, let alone find their lifeless, bloody body. No one ever expects to have everything important to them ripped away from them in a single afternoon. I'm not sure anyone can understand where Alan and I sit. We both lost our children, one at the hand of the other. We never saw this coming and still cannot make sense of it. To know that my son, who I carried for 9 months, caused all of this heartache and tragedy is still a complete shock.
Let's bring back in our power panel, Madeline Somerville, Bob Bianchi, and Philip Dubé. Philip, let me start with you on this one. This sentencing hearing is all about whether a 15-year-old should get life without parole for what was done.
Yeah, this one is a tragedy. It truly is. Right now, to be fair to this young man, the prosecution has a burden. They have to really show that all the aggravators, if you will, outweigh the mitigators for purposes of seeking life without parole, meaning that life without parole for this young man has to be proportionate to the facts. Otherwise, it could violate the 8th Amendment to the Constitution. So the question now is, what have they really proven in aggravation? Well, they put on all the details of the crime. We all knew what exactly all these witnesses were going to say. The real question is, what was going on in a 15-year-old's mind at the time that we don't know now? He was a tender 15, and my guess is they're going to find out that he had onset of schizophrenia, that he was in and out of a delusional system, and that he also had a personality disorder that was sort of in being, namely maybe an intermittent explosive personality disorder, a conduct disorder, or even the borderline personality disorder. The problem is, for those types of disorders, there really is no medicinal treatment. It's all rooted in behavioral therapy. And to be fair to this kid, I think we can know within either a determinate period of time or a certain term of prison with a possibility of parole, whether or not he will respond to treatment. But just to lock him up and throw away the key and not give all of the clinicians in the penal system the opportunity to try to fix this young man and give him insight into his illness, I think does health and wellness a disservice, not just clinically in the civilized world, but also in the prison system. Let them do their job so that this young man has something to look forward to, at least in 20, 30, or even 40 years.
Bob Bianchi, I see you reacting.
Something to look forward to. With all due respect, and Phil, please, I love you. We've been on a long time ago. If there is not a juvenile, or a young person that commits a crime like this that should not serve a life without parole sentence after purposefully, knowingly, callously picking up a weapon and slaughtering 5 people, if this isn't the guy, then you never should give anyone a life without parole sentence. Now, I understand. He may have psychiatric problems. I hope he does have psychiatric problems. I hope that psychiatric problems would be the only reason somebody would do something like this. In my opinion, anybody who does something like this has psychiatric problems. He got a break because he's not going to get the death penalty. He got a break because he's going to be entitled to a hearing. But with all due respect to whatever his mental health issues or not, he knew what he was doing on that day. And there are 5 lives and 5 families' lives destroyed because of it. I have very little sympathy. And I was a pretty, I used to go into mental health offenses, so on and so forth. But you've got to also administer justice and a response to this and a deterrence to let people know, I don't care how young you are, killing 5 people is unacceptable. And I'm sorry, you don't have anything to look forward to except 3 squares.
Now, Madeline, the sentiments of Bob are no doubt shared by the people in that community.
Yes.
I mean, they are all victims because there were moments in time where they knew there was a shooter on the loose, but didn't know where or who or why. I mean, that's when you were checking on all of your family and friends when there's literally an active shooter on the loose. Tell me about your reaction to this case and whether or not you think there should have been a change of venue.
Yeah, so I think that actually a change of venue is usually appropriate in cases. I'm often an advocate for that, but I think I sit somewhere between our 2 panelists here, although I usually am very tough on people when it comes to crime, and I wouldn't blame the families if they had a frontier justice response for this, honestly, because I can understand I can't understand how devastating that must be. But as somebody who studies body language and who was able to watch this, and I did watch and hear the mother's entire speech, as somebody who is trained to work with trauma victims to be able to express themselves, actually whoever talked with her first, whoever taught her to speak, the mother needs a medal. Because I know it seems like she was pretty monotone or monotonous throughout it, but actually I watched all of her micro expressions and heard the differences in her voice. And it just goes to show you that you really can do everything right, and sometimes this happens, which would coincide actually with him having a psychiatric disorder and watching his behavior while this happened. When she said, I carried you for 9 months, like when you played that before, I watched his face turn bright red and I watched him squirm in his seat. He feels it. He's not without feeling. Now that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to have 3 squares. But I can hear the argument, I can see the argument, and I see everyone hurting here because it's a tragedy all around.
Philip, I got to get your take on something that the mother brought up, and we can anticipate it being in the defense argument here. The acne medication that he was taking, his brother was taking it too, but whether or not there may be some question about side effects, and the video games that he spent a lot of time on. There were teachers who testified about these shooting video games. There's a lot of attention on social media addiction right now, but there's a well-established body of science behind video game addiction.
You cannot believe the warning labels on Accutane. You should read it. Just go online and Google it. It is particularly has a sort of a psychoactive effect, if you will, on the juvenile brain. In fact, you cannot believe all the consent forms that the minor and the parents have to sign to even get the prescription. And just so viewers know, it's designed to treat really significant acute cases of cystic acne, where the acne is literally not just on the face and the scalp, but all over the body. And a lot of parents will go ahead and consent to it, first of all, to make sure that the kid does not have infection throughout the body, and so that the dermal layer on the body is not scarred for life. The problem is you have to kind of juxtapose that against the side effects. And there is absolutely empirical data to show that kids become psychotic, they become suicidal, and a lot of it is just impulsive. They lack any sense of reasoning and judgment when they're on that drug. It would not surprise me in the least. Now, as for the social media and the video stuff, look, there are some kids who are susceptible to that type of gunplay on watching it consistently and constantly on video and on television. I'm not sure that it would really rise to the level of compelling someone to want to end life. It certainly could be explored, but I would be hesitant to think that that would drive this type of homicidal rage.
Philip, a lot of hot button issues here. I know the panelists want to get in, but we have to get to a break and leave it there. We're going to continue to follow this story. More testimony is happening there in North Carolina tomorrow. We've got to take a break. When we come back, though, we're going to get the hot takes on the cold facts, including this one. An Olympic gold medalist known as the fastest woman in the world getting arrested for super speeding. And we watched the moment a cop asked her why she was driving more than 100 miles an hour.
This is the Court TV podcast.
Welcome back. Let's get right to the hot takes from our power panel on some of the biggest headlines developing today. This one out of, it's having to do with an Olympic track star. Sha'Carri Richardson has entered a not guilty plea after allegedly going 104 miles per hour on a parkway just outside of Orlando, Florida. She tried to plead her way out of going to jail. Take a look at this body cam video.
Gas in the car at 101, 103, 104. You are going to jail.
Sir, am I going to jail, Jake?
Yes.
Sir, I really was not intentionally speeding.
That's even more scary. That means that you're doing things unintentionally on a task that requires all your attention.
Now, Sha'Carri, who is 25, claimed her back tire was going flat as the reason for her speeding. She also said her phone accidentally changed the car's setting, but the officer didn't buy it. Richardson was arrested on one charge of dangerous excessive speeding and cited for several violations. Let's get takes from our power panel. Madeline Somerville, Bob Bianchi, and Philip Dubé. You get 25 seconds to state your case so we can get to all the cases and to all of you. Madeline, your take.
Let's do it. So, Sha'Carri Richardson, I can understand that an Olympian would feel superhuman, right? And that she probably could control herself under pressure, so she could handle going this fast. That would make sense to me. It would also make sense to me that she thought she could talk her way out of it. But I did laugh when I heard the police officer say, that's even more scary if you didn't know what you were doing. But I think it's the feeling of being superhuman. I can handle it. It doesn't matter if I'm actually breaking the law, but you were.
Okay, so she's so fast that in our regular speed limits are slow for her. Bob Bianchi, yes. Your take.
Yes.
I got two perspectives on this, and I'm not going to be warm and fuzzy with her. You're driving 104 miles an hour. You want to kill yourself, that's one thing. But I, as a prosecutor, have had to put too many people in jail, good people that have killed other innocent victims and hurt themselves, really, because they're spending the rest of their lives in jail. So from that perspective, deterrence needs to be had here. Secondly, as a motorcycle rider, this is your nightmare. This is the person that I worry about every time I get on a bike that's not going to be following the rules, going to run in the back of me on a motorcycle and kill me.
Philip Dubé, what's the outcome here? Do you think as a celebrity, this court system is actually going to be more harsh on her?
Oh, I would say rack them and give this to a jury, and I'll tell you why. She's got one thing going for her, and it's how Florida law defines being a super speeder. It is not illegal to drive 100 miles an hour. In fact, it's not even illegal to drive 200 miles an hour. It's only illegal if there is actual evidence that you threatened somehow the operation of another vehicle. If you didn't threaten or somehow impair anybody else's safety or another vehicle, there's no crime. So in
that's the time,
world,
Philip.
We say rack up.
We know there's super speeder laws there in Florida. Let's move to our second story of the night. Ryan Borghardt, the kayaker who faked his own drowning in Wisconsin, was a no-show in a court hearing on Tuesday. This was a hearing to discuss a motion that he filed to exclude certain digital evidence in his case and have it sealed. Police say he faked his death back in August of 2024, flipping his kayak, taking a raft to shore, and then used various means of transportation to travel to Europe to meet a Ukrainian woman. He was sentenced to 89 days in jail. He only served about 60 of those. He's required to pay $30,000 for search effort costs. Bob Bianchi, let me get your take first on this one. He also got out early on a work release.
I don't know, man. I love this guy. I don't know why. It's like every guy's dream, you know. The guy goes on a kayak. I just want to disappear. I want to go find the Ukrainian woman. I just want to be gone. I don't know. This guy's obviously got some sort of mental disturbance. He makes a good story. He didn't show up in court. He's going to pay the consequences. You want to talk about mental illness? This is a guy we need to give a break to, in my opinion.
All right, Philip Dubé, let me get your take.
No consequences whatsoever. He's not accused of violating his probation. He filed a motion merely to delete all the digital evidence. He didn't show up on his own motion. So what happens? It goes off calendar. He doesn't get the relief that he wanted. It goes uncontested. So you know what? Go live your life, enjoy your life, you know, and be done with it.
It's a unique crime, Madeline. I mean, it's hard to know even what you're being charged with. He's definitely trying to get away from his family. Yeah. But all of those people were searching for him thinking he was dead.
See, that is what bothers me about all of this. And I know that I've been the moderate tonight, and I'm usually not. I'm usually the conservative when it comes to crimes. And I'm going to take the conservative position here, too. I don't like it. I don't like it. You had all these people looking for you. You knew that you could stop it, but you didn't. And that offends me. And so I do think that he should have to pay all the costs and spend the time in jail, because everyone's worried. That's not okay. It's the Jewish mother in me. I don't like it.
All right. Well, let's move to our final story of the night. This one involving the stepson of TV star Dog the Bounty Hunter, accused of killing his 13-year-old son. Gregory Zecca's son, Anthony, died July 2025. Investigators say Zecca got drunk and high on marijuana before firing a gun in the child's presence. Now, at some point, the magazine was reinserted and the victim was fatally shot with a single shot. Now, he is charged with aggravated manslaughter of a child with a firearm, using a firearm under the influence as well. He faces life in prison if convicted. Madeline, let me first get your take on this case.
Life in prison is too good for him, in my opinion. I think that, you know, if it were a 15-year-old like we had seen earlier tonight, somebody who didn't have life experience, who is prone to being more reckless, maybe. But this is an adult. This is somebody who is taking his own child's safety into his own hands when he had a loaded gun in front of him. You know, the law has provisions for people who behave with reckless disregard for other people's safety, and this is the exact place for that.
Philip Dubé, your take?
Oh, he's the classic example of why I don't post people's bail. He's going to jump bail. And do you really think that if Dog puts up his bail, he's not going to hunt him down like the bounty hunter he is? He's going to hunt him down and bring him in waist chains to court and have him bucketed so quickly so he can get his money back.
Bob Bianchi, final thoughts on this one. I mean, it's a public service announcement reminder about safe handling of firearms.
These are the kind of cases that kept me up at night as a prosecutor. On one hand, you have a guy who's going to live a life sentence because he killed his child accidentally. On the other hand, you have a guy who had a firearm, who had a responsibility not to be drinking and playing with a gun. It happens so often in the law enforcement community, may I add, as well, and it had tragic consequences. And unfortunately, as a prosecutor, I think I would be moving towards the side that deterrence is going to have to win here, and he's going to have to go in.
Everyone, thank you so much for your takes. We got them all in time. Got to all of them. Madeline Somerville, Philip Dubé, and Bob Bianchi. Thank you so much for weighing in with your opinions. Good night to you. Have a great, safe rest of your day. Thank you for connecting with us this hour. I'm Julia Jenaé for Court of Opinion, reminding you we all have opinions, but they should be rooted in the facts, and we should be striving to respect the next person's opinion, even when we don't agree on it, like we do here on Court of Opinion.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.